Stuttgart, Germany, 1944. A Kübelwagen factory. German engineers stood proudly beside their assembly line. 12 vehicles per day, 144 per month, over 1,700 per year. This was efficient mass production. The Kübelwagen, Germany's equivalent to America's Jeep, was a technical marvel. Lightweight, air-cooled engine, excellent off-road capability. German engineering at its finest. The factory manager calculated the numbers with satisfaction. At this rate, they could supply dozens of divisions with reconnaissance vehicles. The production was impressive by any standard. German precision engineering combined with systematic manufacturing. The workers moved with practiced efficiency. Each vehicle carefully assembled. Quality control at every stage. Across the Atlantic Ocean, in Toledo, Ohio, a very different scene was unfolding. The Willys-Overland factory floor stretched nearly a quarter-mile. The noise was deafening. Pneumatic tools, welding torches, engines being tested, metal being hammered and shaped. 450 Jeeps rolled off the line every single day. Not per week, not per month, per day. One complete vehicle every 80 seconds. Every 80 seconds, a new Jeep drove off the assembly line under its own power, fully functional, ready for combat. 13,500 per month, 162,000 per year. From one factory alone. America had multiple factories producing Jeeps. The German factory manager producing 12 Kübelwagens per day would have considered these numbers physically impossible. He would have assumed American propaganda. No industrial process could possibly produce vehicles that quickly. There must be an error, a mistranslation, a zero added by mistake. But the numbers were real, brutally, overwhelmingly real, and they represented something fundamental about American industrial power that Germany never understood until it was far too late. This is the story of the Jeep, not just a vehicle, but a symbol of American industrial capacity that helped win World War II. A machine so simple that German engineers dismissed it as crude. So reliable that American soldiers wrote poems about it. So versatile that it served as reconnaissance vehicle, ambulance, weapons platform, command post, supply truck, and even amphibious assault craft, and so numerous that it became the most recognizable military vehicle in history. General Dwight Eisenhower said after the war that only 3 things won World War II: the C-47 transport aircraft, the atomic bomb, and the Jeep. This is the story of the third item on that list. The vehicle that was everywhere, did everything, and was produced in such staggering numbers that Germany simply couldn't comprehend the industrial capacity it represented. The Jeep's story begins not with military planning or engineering genius, but with desperation and an impossibly short deadline. June 1940. France had fallen. Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. The U.S. Army, watching events in Europe with growing alarm, recognized it was woefully unprepared for modern mechanized warfare. American military equipment was outdated. Organizational structures were antiquated. The entire army numbered fewer than 200,000 soldiers. Among the many deficiencies, the army identified a critical gap. It had no small, lightweight reconnaissance vehicle. Motorcycles were fast, but vulnerable. Trucks were capable but too large and slow for reconnaissance. What the army needed was something in between. A small, rugged, versatile vehicle that could go anywhere, do anything, and be maintained easily under field conditions. In June 1940, the Army Quartermaster Corps issued a specification for what they called a light reconnaissance vehicle. The requirements were specific and demanding. Weight under 1,300 pounds, 4-wheel drive, 3-seat capacity, fold-down windshield for reduced profile, ability to carry a machine gun, capable of operating on minimal roads or no roads at all, simple enough for field maintenance, durable enough for combat conditions, and cheap enough to produce in large quantities. The Army gave American automotive manufacturers 49 days to design and deliver a working prototype. 49 days. From specification to functioning vehicle. Most automotive development programs took years. The Army was asking for a complete design, engineering, testing, and prototype production in 7 weeks. Most major manufacturers passed. Ford initially showed interest, but asked for more time. American Bantam Car Company, a small, struggling manufacturer in Butler, Pennsylvania, took the challenge. They had nothing to lose. The company was nearly bankrupt. This contract might save them. American Bantam's chief engineer, Karl Probst, worked frantically. He had no time for extensive testing or iterative design. He needed to get the fundamentals right immediately. 4-wheel drive for traction, minimal weight for mobility, simple mechanical systems for reliability and easy repair, versatile mounting points for different equipment. Probst delivered a working prototype in 49 days, exactly on deadline. The Army tested it and was impressed. It met nearly all specifications. Only problem, it weighed slightly more than 1,300 pounds. Close enough. But the Army had concerns about American Bantam's production capacity. The company was small, its financial situation precarious. Could it really manufacture thousands of vehicles? Tens of thousands? The Army needed this vehicle in massive quantities. So the Army did something controversial. It shared American Bantam's design with Willys-Overland and Ford, asking them to develop their own versions. American Bantam protested. Their design was being given to competitors, but the Army's priority was production capacity, not protecting one company's intellectual property. National security trumped business concerns. Willys-Overland, a larger company with stronger manufacturing capability, refined the design. Their chief engineer, Barney Roos, made critical improvements. He specified a more powerful engine, the Go Devil 4-cylinder producing 60 horsepower. He strengthened the frame. He improved the 4-wheel drive system. The result was heavier than the original specification, 2,300 pounds instead of 1,300, but far more capable. Ford also submitted a design largely based on the Willys improvements. All 3 companies received initial contracts to produce 1,500 vehicles each for Army testing. The testing was brutal. Vehicles were driven through mud, sand, water, over rocks, up steep hills, through forests. They were overloaded, driven at high speeds over rough terrain, subjected to conditions no civilian vehicle would survive. The testing continued through 1941. By July 1941, the Army made its decision. Willys-Overland's design was superior. It would become the standard. The Army designated it Truck 1/4 ton 4x4 and assigned it the designation Willys MB. Ford would also produce vehicles to the same specification under the designation Ford GPW, but nobody called it Truck 1/4 ton 4x4. Soldiers called it the Jeep. The origin of the name Jeep is debated. Some claim it came from GP, General Purpose. Others say it referenced a character from Popeye cartoons, Eugene the Jeep, a small creature that could go anywhere and do anything. Regardless of origin, the name stuck. By 1941, everyone called it the Jeep. Now came the real challenge: mass production. The Army's initial order was modest by later standards, 16,000 vehicles. But as America entered the war after Pearl Harbor in December 1941, that number exploded. The Army realized it needed Jeeps everywhere. for reconnaissance, for officers' transportation, for medical evacuation, for communications, for supply delivery. The demand seemed limitless. Willys-Overland's Toledo factory underwent massive expansion. New production lines were installed. Workforce expanded from a few thousand to over 15,000 workers. Ford's facility in Dearborn was similarly transformed. Both companies applied automotive mass production techniques perfected by Henry Ford decades earlier. But they took it further. The Jeep's design was optimized specifically for mass production. Every component was standardized. Parts were interchangeable between Willys and Ford production. Manufacturing processes were simplified. Anything that complicated production was redesigned or eliminated. The result was a production rate that seemed impossible. By 1943, Willys-Overland was producing 450 Jeeps per day, one every 80 seconds. Ford's production was nearly as high. Combined, American factories were producing over 600 Jeeps every single day. Think about that number. 600 per day means 25 per hour, one every 2.4 minutes. Across both companies, a new Jeep was completed somewhere in America more frequently than most people brush their teeth. The production statistics are staggering. In 1941, roughly 25,000 Jeeps were produced. In 1942, 150,000. In 1943, 250,000. In 1944, production peaked at over 300,000. By war's end in 1945, over 640,000 Jeeps had been manufactured. 640,000 vehicles. If you lined them up bumper to bumper, they'd stretch from New York to Los Angeles and back with thousands to spare. The cost was equally remarkable. Initially expensive to tool up production, the per-unit cost dropped dramatically with volume. By 1943, each Jeep cost the Army $738.74. Less than $800 for a complete four-wheel drive vehicle, including tires, tools, and basic equipment. Compare this to Germany's Kübelwagen, which cost approximately $2,000 per unit. American Jeeps were being produced for roughly one-third the cost of the German equivalent. But the Jeep's significance wasn't just numbers or cost. It was versatility. The Jeep could do anything. Soldiers discovered this quickly and pushed the vehicle far beyond its original reconnaissance mission. Need an ambulance? Mount stretchers across the hood and rear. 4 wounded soldiers could be transported, 2 lying down and 2 sitting. Need a weapons platform? Mount a .50 caliber machine gun on a pedestal in the rear. Instant mobile firepower. Some units mounted multiple machine guns. A few mounted 37mm anti-tank guns, though the recoil when firing was reportedly exciting. Need a command vehicle? Add a radio, map board, and extra seating. Generals used Jeeps to move quickly around battlefields, staying close to frontline troops. Need to lay communications wire? Mount a large spool on the back and drive forward, unrolling wire behind you. Instant field telephone network. Need to clear mines? Some Jeeps were equipped with experimental mine detection equipment or used to pull mine-clearing sleds. Need an amphibious vehicle? Ford developed an experimental waterproofing system and propeller attachment. The SEEP, Sea Jeep, could drive into water and propel itself across rivers or coastal areas. Production was limited, but it demonstrated the platform's adaptability. Need emergency power? Engage the power takeoff and run a belt to a generator. Instant mobile electrical power source. Need a fire engine? Some Pacific bases mounted water tanks and pumps on Jeeps for firefighting. Need a snowplow? Mount a blade on the front. Jeeps cleared runways and roads during winter operations. The list went on. Soldiers discovered new uses constantly. The Jeep's simple mechanical design meant almost anything could be bolted, welded, or strapped to it. The four-wheel drive meant it could go almost anywhere. The reliable engine meant it kept running under conditions that would disable more complex vehicles. This versatility was intentional, but also emergent. The designers created a simple, rugged platform. Soldiers in the field discovered what that platform could do. The Army learned to anticipate Jeeps doing jobs nobody had imagined during design. German forces, encountering Jeeps in North Africa in 1942, were initially dismissive. The vehicle looked crude, no refinement, basic suspension, Spartan interior. Compared to German engineering with its emphasis on precision and sophistication, the Jeep seemed primitive. But German soldiers quickly learned to respect it. The Jeep went places German vehicles couldn't. It kept running when German vehicles broke down. It was repaired in the field with minimal tools when German vehicles required factory service. And there were so many of them. Everywhere. Every American unit had Jeeps, plural. Multiple vehicles per company. The abundance was shocking. German forces captured Jeeps whenever possible. Captured Jeeps were prized. German soldiers preferred driving captured Jeeps over their own Kübelwagens because the Jeeps were more reliable, more powerful, and more versatile. This preference for enemy equipment over domestic production was embarrassing for German military leadership, but undeniable at field level. German engineers studied captured Jeeps intensively. They disassembled them, measured every component, analyzed the manufacturing techniques, tried to understand how Americans produced them so cheaply and quickly. The engineering was unimpressive by German standards. Nothing sophisticated. Simple leaf springs instead of advanced suspension. Basic four-cylinder engine without innovative features. Crude steering system. Minimal instrumentation. It was, by German standards, unsophisticated. But it worked, reliably, everywhere, under all conditions. And it was produced in numbers Germany couldn't approach. This was the fundamental lesson German engineers struggled to internalize. The Jeep wasn't superior because of advanced engineering. It was superior because of producibility. American design philosophy prioritized ease of manufacture, reliability under field conditions, and versatility over technical sophistication. German engineering emphasized excellence, making the best possible version of something. American engineering emphasized abundance, making good enough versions in overwhelming quantities. When you can produce 10 adequate vehicles for the cost of one excellent vehicle, the 10 adequate vehicles usually win. The Jeep embodied this philosophy perfectly. It wasn't the most comfortable vehicle. Soldiers complained about the rough ride. It wasn't the most powerful. The 60-horsepower engine was modest. It wasn't the most advanced. German vehicles had superior suspension and more refined engineering. But the Jeep was everywhere. In North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, Germany, Pacific Islands, Burma, China, Alaska, everywhere American forces operated, Jeeps were present in massive numbers. The sheer quantity overwhelmed any technical superiority German vehicles possessed. There's a famous anecdote, possibly apocryphal, but capturing the essential truth. A German officer, examining a captured Jeep in 1943, reportedly said, "The Americans don't make good vehicles. They make good quantities of adequate vehicles, and the quantities win." Whether or not this exact quote is real, it captures German military leadership's dawning realization. They were fighting an enemy whose industrial capacity so exceeded their own that technical superiority became irrelevant. When America could produce 600 Jeeps per day, while Germany produced 12 Kübelwagens, no amount of engineering excellence closed the gap. This realization came gradually and too late. In 1940, Germany assumed it could win quickly before American industrial capacity mobilized. In 1941 to 1942, German leadership still believed German technical superiority and military excellence would prevail. By 1943 to 1944, the truth was undeniable. America was outproducing Germany across every category of military equipment, and the Jeep was the most visible symbol of this industrial supremacy. American soldiers developed deep affection for the Jeep. It saved lives, as ambulance, as escape vehicle under fire, as reliable transportation when everything else failed. Soldiers wrote poems about their Jeeps. They gave them names. They decorated them with art and personalization despite regulations against it. The bond between soldier and Jeep was genuine and earned. One poem, author unknown, circulated among units. "A Jeep will take you anywhere. Through mud and grime and desert glare, it climbs the hills, it fords the streams, it's tougher than your wildest dreams." Not great poetry, but heartfelt. The Jeep became a symbol of American presence and capability. When Allied forces liberated towns in Europe, the first vehicles residents saw were often Jeeps. Children ran after them. Adults waved. The Jeep meant Americans had arrived, and with them, hope for liberation. General George Patton reportedly said he could win any battle if he had enough Jeeps and enough gasoline. Patton used Jeeps extensively for rapid movement around his command area, for reconnaissance, for communications. His Third Army consumed Jeeps in large numbers because Patton's aggressive tactics meant vehicles were constantly operating under harsh conditions. But there were always more Jeeps. Supply never seemed to run out. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commanding German forces in North Africa, had the opposite problem. German supply chains struggled to deliver adequate numbers of vehicles. When vehicles broke down, which happened frequently under desert conditions, replacement parts were scarce. Replacement vehicles even scarcer. Rommel's forces became increasingly immobile not because of combat losses, but because of mechanical breakdown and inability to repair or replace vehicles. American forces faced mechanical issues too, but the response was different. Jeep broke down? Get another from the motor pool. Need parts? Supply system kept them flowing forward. Can't repair it quickly? Abandon it and get a replacement. The abundance meant individual vehicle losses barely mattered. This abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset shaped entire military strategies. American forces could afford aggressive tactics that risked vehicle losses because replacements were plentiful. German forces had to conserve equipment, making them more cautious and reactive. The Jeep also played a crucial psychological role. German soldiers, seeing the endless numbers of American vehicles, understood they were facing an enemy with virtually unlimited resources. This realization damaged morale. How could Germany win when the enemy could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them? Soviet forces, receiving Jeeps through Lend-Lease, had similar reactions. Soviet soldiers appreciated Jeep reliability and simplicity. Soviet military leadership appreciated American production capacity. Stalin himself reportedly commented on American industrial might, specifically mentioning Jeeps as evidence of capabilities beyond Soviet imagination. By 1944, Jeeps were so ubiquitous that soldiers joked they were easier to find than water. In European theater, you couldn't walk a mile without seeing multiple Jeeps. In Pacific theater, every island American forces occupied soon had Jeeps driving around, somehow transported despite logistics challenges. The post-war story of the Jeep is almost as remarkable as the wartime story. When war ended in 1945, hundreds of thousands of military Jeeps were suddenly surplus. Many were sold to civilians. Others were given to Allied nations. Some were simply abandoned in place. Willys-Overland recognized commercial potential. Soldiers returning home had grown accustomed to Jeeps' utility. There might be civilian market for similar vehicle. In 1945, Willys introduced the CJ-2A, Civilian Jeep Model 2A. It was essentially the military Jeep with minor modifications: tailgate, side-mounted spare tire, canvas top, more comfortable seats. The civilian Jeep was successful. Farmers bought them for field work. Rural residents bought them for poor road transportation. Outdoors enthusiasts bought them for recreation. The Jeep became an American icon, transcending its military origins. Through various corporate owners, Willys, Kaiser, AMC, Chrysler, and now Stellantis, the Jeep brand continued. The modern Jeep Wrangler is a direct descendant of the World War II Willys MB. 90 years later, the design DNA is still recognizable. Round headlights, vertical grille slots, fold-down windshield available, removable doors, go-anywhere capability. This longevity is testament to the original design's fundamental soundness. Karl Probst and Barney Roos created something enduringly useful, simple enough to maintain, rugged enough to last, versatile enough for countless uses. These qualities worked in 1941 and still work today. The Jeep influenced global automotive design. Soviet Gazoo 67 was a near copy. British Land Rover was inspired by Jeeps left behind after war. Japan's Toyota Land Cruiser drew from Jeep principles. The entire category of sport utility vehicle traces ancestry to the World War II Jeep. But beyond automotive history and commercial success, the Jeep represents something profound about American industrial culture and military power. It represents the triumph of producibility over sophistication, the victory of abundance over technical excellence, the power of good enough in overwhelming quantities over perfect in limited numbers. German engineering was superior in many ways. German tanks were better armored and more heavily gunned than American tanks. German aircraft were faster and more advanced than many American aircraft. German small arms were more refined than American equivalents. But Germany lost because it couldn't produce enough of these superior weapons quickly enough. America won not by making the best weapons, though American weapons were generally good, but by making good weapons in quantities that overwhelmed enemy capacity to respond. The Jeep was the clearest example of this. Not the best possible small vehicle, the most producible small vehicle. Not the most advanced engineering, the most manufacturable engineering. This principle, prioritizing producibility and quantity over technical perfection, defined American military-industrial success in World War II. It applied to Liberty ships produced in days, B-24 bombers rolling off assembly lines hourly, and Jeeps completed every 80 seconds. The Germans never figured it out. Even late in the war, when German industrial capacity was collapsing under Allied bombing and resource shortages, German engineering still prioritized sophistication. Tiger tanks were engineering marvels, but took thousands of man-hours to produce. Me-262 jet fighters were revolutionary, but complex and resource-intensive. Germany kept trying to win through technical superiority, even as American quantity was burying them. The Jeep symbolized this fundamental strategic difference. A simple vehicle, produced in staggering numbers, doing countless jobs, going everywhere, keeping troops mobile and supplied and connected. Not because it was perfect, because there were 640,000 of them. When General Eisenhower said the Jeep was one of 3 things that won the war, he wasn't exaggerating. The Jeep gave American forces mobility, versatility, and logistical capability that enemy forces couldn't match. It was the vehicle that was always there, always worked. always got the job done. The production rate, 1 every 80 seconds for 4 years, represents American industrial capacity at its peak. No other nation in World War II could have achieved it. Not Germany, not Japan, not even the Soviet Union, despite its vast resources. Only America had the combination of manufacturing expertise, industrial infrastructure, resource access, and organizational capability to produce military vehicles like consumer products. 640,000 Jeeps in 4 years, 450 per day from a single factory, 1 every 80 seconds. These numbers tell a story of industrial supremacy that Germany recognized too late and could never match. The Germans never figured out how America did it. They understood the manufacturing principles. American methods weren't secret. But understanding and executing are different things. Germany's industrial culture, its resource limitations, its strategic situation, prevented matching American production even if German engineers understood the methods. The Jeep won World War II not by being the best vehicle, but by being good enough and being everywhere. That was the American way of war, and it was unstoppable. 1 every 80 seconds. For 4 years. 640,000 total. The Germans produced 12 Kübelwagens per day and thought they were doing well. The Americans produced 450 Jeeps per day from a single factory and considered it normal. That difference, that vast, overwhelming difference in industrial capacity, tells you everything about why World War II ended the way it did. The Jeep wasn't the most advanced vehicle. German engineering was superior in many respects, but the Jeep was producible, maintainable, versatile, reliable, and most importantly, it existed in numbers that made German production look like a hobby workshop. General Eisenhower said 3 things won the war: the C-47 transport, the atomic bomb, and the Jeep. He placed a simple, rugged, mass-produced vehicle in the same category as nuclear weapons. That's how important the Jeep was. That's how much American industrial capacity mattered. The Germans never figured out the secret. They kept trying to win through technical excellence, while America won through overwhelming abundance. 1 Jeep every 80 seconds proved which strategy worked better. If stories like this fascinate you, the industrial achievements, the production miracles, the ways America overwhelmed enemies through sheer manufacturing capacity, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of War Rewind. We're uncovering the untold stories of World War II every day. Not just the battles, but the industrial might, the innovations, and the capacity that actually won the war.